Hey everyone, welcome back to the Functional Retirement Podcast, where we get technical about your wealth, philosophical about your purpose, and inspirational on your fitness. I'm your host, Thatcher Taylor. I'm so happy to have you. As the owner of ProPath Financial, I do a lot of retirement planning, and one big thing that come up often recently are Roth conversions as you prepare for retirement. Now, this did not come from a client question. This came from a listener that listened to the podcast, and they had a question about their particular situation and Roth conversions. So I got to tell you the question first. I got to tell you what they asked just to set the stage on what we're going to talk about today, which is essentially Roth conversions, how they work. Are you going to be penalized on a Roth conversion? And then whether or not you should even be doing Roth conversions. So here's the question. Essentially, it's two questions. I have two questions related doing Roth IRA conversions. We're going to call these people Bob and Jane. So Bob asks, my wife has both traditional and Roth IRAs, and both have been open for well over 5 years. That's a big key. We'll talk about that in a second. She's over 59 and a half. Also another big key. If she does a Roth conversion, is the conversion still subject to a 5-year conversion waiting period, even though she's over age 59 and a half? Now that's part one. Now part two, Bob was asking about himself. It says, I also have both a traditional and Roth IRAs, and both have been open for well over 5 years. Remember that. He's under age 59 and a half. Remember that as well. If I do a Roth conversion, does the 5-year conversion waiting period end when I turn 59 and a half? Or do I need to wait the 5 years because I converted before age 59 and a half? Now, this is a phenomenal question. Thanks, Bob and Jane. That's not their real names. I'm just trying to protect them. I try to protect everybody. But this has become so popular recently because the Roth conversion discussion has become substantially larger because people are concerned about future tax rates. They're concerned about the debt ceiling and future tax rates changing. And in 2025, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is going to sunset, which essentially means all the tax bracket percentages are going to increase essentially overnight. So this is phenomenal. We're going to talk about their question. We're going to talk about, in addition to the question, if they should even worry about the penalty, if it even matters. So the questions are specifically referring to the 5-year rule for Roth conversions. A Roth conversion is the opportunity to convert sums of money from a traditional IRA or 401k and put that money into a Roth IRA, essentially within a day or two, while paying taxes on the amount converted. And then you're able to take the money out, the converted amount, and the earnings without penalty. That's the ultimate goal at some point in the future, to be able to take it all out without penalty. It's a pretty cool tactic in the right situation. But before we continue, to learn more about Roth conversions, I have a supporting article, a blog article on www.propathfinancial.com/post/taxable conversion to learn more. That's PROPATH financial.com/post/taxable conversion. If you want to read a little bit more about this and be able to check this podcast out either in audio or video format, if you want to do one or the other. If you have questions about this, you can reach me directly, propathfinancial.com, click the Get Started button. So to continue, we need to get a clear picture of a Roth conversion, the rules, what the IRS says specifically, and the purpose of the tactic. That's really important. Like, why are you doing all this? Just because you read it somewhere, or a neighbor or a friend told you about it, or you saw my podcast and you're listening to me talk about it, and you're like, yeah, maybe I should do that. You need to understand the purpose. So let's first set the stage for what Bob and Jane are talking about. They're talking about the 5-year rule with Roth IRAs. This is specific to Roth IRAs, not traditional IRAs, although traditional IRAs are part of the process. This is Roth IRA specific. Now, there are two rules. First rule doesn't apply here, but the first 5-year rule is for tax-free distribution on earnings. And this is the regular rule that everyone knows, where you have to have had your Roth IRA open for 5 years before you can take the earnings out tax-free. Because that's what everyone wants. You want to be able to put money into a Roth IRA. It grows and grows and grows and grows over a long period of time. And you can take the earnings out and your original contribution out completely tax-free at any point in the future, as long as you don't break the rules. But to be able to do that, you had to have had the Roth IRA open for 5 years first. That's not the rule we're talking about today. What we're talking about is the 5-year rule for conversions. Because the first 5-year rule usually applies to contributions, where you take money that you've already paid tax on, you make contributions to your Roth IRA. What we're talking about is a 5-year rule for conversions. At some point in the future with a conversion, you have the idea of taking pre-tax dollars out of a traditional IRA, pay the taxes on the amount, and put in a Roth IRA. So now you're under future tax-free Roth rules. That rule has a different 5-year rule where you cannot touch the converted funds for 5 years. But if you remember Bob and Jane's question about their ages, Bob said Jane was older than 59 and a half, and Bob said he was younger than 59 and a half. If you convert and you withdraw funds before 5 years, the converted amount could come with a 10% penalty. So here's an example. Say you convert $100,000. And within 2 years, you want to take money out of the Roth IRA, maybe say that $100,000. If you do it within 5 years, the initial rule is you will have a 10% penalty or a $10,000 penalty. You've already paid the taxes. You've already done on the conversion, you already paid the taxes. So that's not the concern. There will be a retroactive penalty if you take the money out too early. All right, so let's just clarify a couple things. Here are 2 things that you need to remember. Rule 1 that I spoke about before applies to taxes and penalties on the earnings in a Roth IRA. Rule 2 applies just to the penalty on the converted amount. Second is Roths. The second thing you need to know is Roths are a long-term account type. Say it with me. Roths are long term. So going back to the question about Bob and Jane, they're 57 and 59, and they're concerned about the 5-year rule. My first question, which we'll address here a little bit later, is why are you concerned about being able to access funds so quickly? Which brings up the next point, the nuts and bolts about conversions. So the rule came from the loophole that people found a long time ago, which again doesn't make any sense to me. But this is an excerpt from an article from Ed Slott. He's the IRA expert. I'll link this article in the show notes or in the comments below if you want to take a look at it. This is a really good refresher on what I'm talking about specifically. And I sent this to Bob and Jane. So I sent this article to Bob and Jane as well. So it says, when you take a distribution from your traditional IRA and convert it to a Roth IRA, that distribution is taxable, but not subject to the 10% early distribution penalty. Perfect. You can convert at any time. You can convert at 40, 50, 52, 53, 54, 55. The conversion is fine. You pay the taxes. There's no penalty. That's normal. This fact meant that soon after Roth IRAs, now I'm continuing reading from Ed Slott. This fact meant that soon after Roth IRAs became law, those looking for a tax loophole started telling younger IRA owners, so people before age 59 and a half, that they could get out of the 10% penalty by doing a Roth conversion. IRA owners could just convert their IRA to a Roth IRA and then the next day withdraw funds from the Roth IRA tax and penalty free. Surprise, surprise. Government got a hold of this and they said, no, you can't do that. IRS is not going to allow you to do that. So the 5-year rule was enacted. But again, this doesn't make sense because it still removes the whole point of the Roth IRA. And what did we say before? Say it with me. Roth IRAs are long-term. So this tactic was used for people that really needed funds right away. They wanted to access traditional IRA dollars and avoid the penalty before age 59 and a half. So they tried to do this to get money out right away, which, you know what, now that I say it out loud, seems pretty intelligent at the time, but it's more of a short-term move. But remember, Roth IRAs are long-term. So here's what it says. I got to read a little bit from publication 590B. And this is what the IRA says about the rule that Bob and Jane are asking about. And in a nutshell, what Bob and Jane are asking about is if they convert, Bob's younger than 59 and a half and Jane is over 59 and a half, does the 5-year rule even apply? So that is the extra level to this. If you're under age 59 and a half, the 5-year rule definitely does apply. But if you pass age 59 and a half, using Bob as an example, is a phenomenal example. He's 57, he converts at age 57, and then he accesses the funds at, say, 3 years instead of 5. Is there still a penalty? Well, the answer to this comes from publication 590B, as in boy. I'll also link this below. It's a big publication. It's a lot to read. I'm a nerd. I've read it a bunch of times, but I want to read this to you specifically. So this is a lot to digest. I'm also going to link the publication 590B below, but I'm going to read this and I'm going to basically summarize this. So forgive me for all the reading, but to understand this, we have to read a little bit about what we're talking about. So distributions from conversions and certain rollover contributions within a 5-year period. Essentially, this says right here, and I quote, you must pay the 10% additional tax in the year of the distribution. So you distributed within 5 years, and it presents that example in this section. Even if you have included the conversion or rollover contribution in an earlier year, you must pay the additional tax on any portion of the distribution attributed to earnings on contributions. That's the first thing. So it's talking about right there, the first 5-year rule. Other early distributions. Unless one of the exceptions listed below applies, you must pay the 10% additional tax on the taxable part of any distribution that aren't qualified distributions. And the exception, the first exception here, is you have reached age 59 and a half. You can read the rest of this yourself, but in short, it is implying in publication 590B that if you convert and then you exceed age 59 and a half, which is meeting one of the exceptions listed, you avoid having to pay the 10% penalty on the converted amount, which is the second 5-year rule. So that answers question number 1 from Bob and Jane, since Jane is over age 59 and a half. It also answers question 2 for Bob, who's age 57. If he converted now and he converted and took the money out in 3 years, would he avoid the penalty? According to how this reads, the answer is yes. This also can be confirmed in the IRA expert Ed Slott article that I linked below. This confirms the same thing, where you can protect yourself by waiting until age 59 and a half to distribute the converted amount. But then it goes back to the original concern. Why are you doing this? What are you doing this for? Like, why do you want the money so quickly? Do you have to have it so quickly? That would be one, I guess, concern. But remember, the whole point about doing this is the deferral on the Roth. So let's go back to our example. You convert $100,000, which is great. You pay the taxes on $100,000 in your tax bracket, which is fine. I'm not concerned about that at one bit. Everybody does that. And now you have the money in there at age 57 or 59 in the Roth IRA. In theory, you should have that money invested based on your goals in some long-term type investment. It doesn't have to be fancy, 8, 9, 10% a year. So you can get the deferral on that money. And using the rule of 72, if you're at 8% a year in return, your money's going to double. So you put $100,000 into the Roth. In the rule of 72, in 9 years, that money's going to double. It's going to be $200,000. In the rule of 115, that money's going to triple in almost about 16 years. So that's $200,000 in 16 years of earnings. That's what you want to be tax-free. Conversions to the Roth are really valuable when you get the earnings to be tax-free. That's why we want to engage in a high-quality Roth conversion strategy, because we want to reduce the future tax ramifications of the money staying in the traditional IRA. Because think about this. If you left that $100,000 in the traditional IRA, it's all taxable. And if you tripled it to $300,000 in 15 or so years based on the rate of return, you have to pay taxes on all $300,000. Not just you, but if you pass away, it goes to your spouse. They got to pay the taxes. If the spouse passes away, it's going to go to the beneficiaries or your heirs, and they're going to have to pay taxes. And they got to do it, distribute it all within 10 years. Getting the money in the Roth pays taxes now in a more favorable tax bracket. The earnings grow tax-free. You can distribute the money, all of it completely tax-free. It'll pass to your spouse tax-free, and it'll pass to your heirs completely tax-free. The purpose of the conversion isn't so you can access the money in a couple years. You're not going to get many earnings on that money in a couple of years. That's the purpose behind doing the conversion. So when I go back to Bob and Jane's question, it's a good question. And I'm glad they're reviewing it. They don't want to get hit with that penalty. It's a great way to review your strategy. But when you think about what you're doing, you're like, I'm not going to access this money for 10 years. Then it doesn't really matter. One element that I do want to add is all subsequent conversions do have a new 5-year rule. So every time you do a conversion, that conversion has its own 5-year rule. Sorry I mentioned it so late. I probably should have mentioned it before, but each conversion has their own 5-year rule. And since we're going down this path, I talked about the 5-year rule for contributions and earnings, the first 5-year rule. That just happens one time. So if you opened up your Roth IRA 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago, it's already set. There's no 5-year rule for additional contributions. There's only a 5-year rule for every converted amount. But as this reads, the IRS, if you exceed age 59 and a half, you don't have to worry about the 10% penalty on the converted amount. Now listen, Roth IRAs and Roth IRA conversions are just an element of a really high quality functional retirement. It's just a piece of the whole puzzle. How does that fit in to your income now, to your income later, to your Social Security decision, to your Medicare decision, to your investment strategy, to your Roth IRA strategy and your traditional IRA strategy? What if you're still working and you have a 401k? How does that fit into your required minimum distributions? How does this all fit into your longevity and longevity risk, which is the risk of running out of money? This is comprehensive planning as we view it. And Roth conversions are just an element within there. It's just a piece of the pie. So I love the questions. I love that you're breaking it down on a very elemental level, but make sure you're figuring out why these decisions fit into your entire retirement portfolio. That's what I do with my clients. If you're over the age of 50, you're getting close to retirement, you need some help, feel free to let me know. Again, the link below, propathfinancial.com/get started. Fill out a little questionnaire so I can learn a little bit about you. And then I reach out and we set up a time to chat. Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to like and subscribe and leave a review. I would really appreciate it. Thank you so much. See you next week.